Before I begin, a little propaganda for all those out there beyond who have historically participated in churches where women are not allowed to preach or be ordained. Let it be noted that the first Easter sermon ever muttered came from a woman. You hear that? I didn't make that up. Sometimes I can have hyperbole, but I didn't make that up. The one who was told to go and proclaim the good news was a woman. Now that I've got the propaganda out of the way, let me move forward. There's a long poem by John Masefield called The Widow in the By Street. And there's a line that when I read, it just hangs there forever. It's one of those lines that never really can go away once you've read it and considered it. A widow looking as her son was about to be hung for crimes against the state. She's watching, vulnerable, about to be alone. And the trap door opens, and the body drops, and the rope does what it has always done in those situations. And the mother is heard to mutter, "Broken things, too broke to mend." Broken things, too broke to mend. Wow, must have felt that way Friday night and all day Saturday for those who had been following Jesus. It must have felt that way. To feel so alone, abandoned, frustrated, hopes dashed, things broken, too broke to mend. Must have felt that way coming into Easter morning. I don't know through the years how many people there have been in pastoral situations, and even in my family situation, and even in terms of institutional situations, that I felt that weight of things broken, too broke to mend. Joe, many people have asked me why. This is the first year I think I've missed because I was changing TVs and couldn't get the DVD player hooked up. But many people have asked me why it is that I get so determined every Good Friday to watch Life of Brian. See, those of you who have watched it, I can hear you snickering, the Monty Python people. The rest of you went, well, what is that? That's okay. You don't want to need to know it. Maybe too much for you anyway. Joe, a plumber, pipe fitter, Cincinnati. You may have heard me mention Joe before. He always is with me. He always weighs in my mind and in my heart. First it was just a skin cancer, and then it was something else, and then something else, and suddenly cancer was everywhere. And he fought it. Probably the only other person I've ever seen fight as hard as John Harbaugh. I mean, Joe stayed with this. Anything and everything in those days that could be found, he fought it. He had had alienation from his children from the first marriage. He had married this incredible woman who had been contemplating becoming a nun, and she was an oblate, and realized that it just wasn't her spiritual personality. And when she left and met Joe, it was like magic. She was standing beside him and praying and hoping, as everyone was. But that alienation was always there. It was like a burden upon him throughout his life. Toward the end, I told Joe, I said, there'll come a moment in time when fight away, but there's going to come a moment in time when, as your pastor, it's going to be a kick your behind moment. And the time came, and I confronted him because it was getting late in the game, and everyone knew it was getting late in the game. And I said to Joe, you need to take care of some business now, Joe. You need to take care of it. And I think Joe felt strongly things broken, too broke to mend, might have described his relationship. But thanks be to God, he was one of the few people who have ever taken his pastor seriously, the best I can tell. He made some calls. Terry, his wife, made some calls, and things happened. And reconciliation took place. And there was joy in the midst of the sadness to come. Everyone in the immediate family was sure that this was things broken, too broke to mend. But, lo and behold, when Joe drew his last breath, he drew it with peace. And he drew it with his family praying for him, caring about him. There was a kind of Easter built into the process. And at the graveside, deep within, I kept giving thanks to God for something far beyond promises that we say at memorial services. I think of my daughter, my oldest daughter, who married someone who was rather broken down. A good guy with a good heart. But he had lived hard, and as I say in Texas, he had been rode hard and put up wet. There were drugs and addictions involved, and while he was trying desperately to stay in recovery and was successful at doing that, much damage had been done. But my daughter loved him. She became aware that she was pregnant, which surprised her. Him too, I think. He had another family in the previous life. Lisa was so happy about the pregnancy. But as the pregnancy moved forward, things didn't look good. And I still remember the week when the doctor said, "Can't go on. This pregnancy isn't viable and your life is threatened." And so a decision had to be made, and it was. I still remember being at a stupid association meeting when I got the call that she had been taken to surgery. And after that, the months that followed were just so hard. Lisa grieves as badly as I do, but she does so in body. And so on her arm still are these huge tattoos memorializing the baby that would be, whom she named. Just saturated with grief. And then some months later, not that long, I can mark it because it was when Katrina happened, and we were overwhelmed in Dallas trying to help Katrina evacuees find some place to live. And I'm trying to get this woman and her daughter on the way to Michigan. Down at the bus, and I get the call, and Elisa says, "Eddie's seriously ill, Dad. They don't think he'll make it through the night," and he didn't. Oh, I could feel the pain. I could feel, and you know, parents, you know how that goes? You know? I mean, if somebody tells me I'm dying, I'm not happy about it. But I can find a way to walk through that. But the pain that happens in our children's lives, we want to take away. And I think back, and it was things broken, too broke to mend. what could you do? But life goes on. She stayed with her program. She walked into the future, grieving desperately. Until much later, I got a call another day, because anytime I get a call from her, I'm always surprised. There's something. I don't know where she gets that from. And she was expecting again. And I didn't even know she had found somebody new. And the dad's such a great guy. And the baby was born. And there was such happiness. Such incredible happiness. And the birth didn't take away all the pain from the past and all the grief. But it was Easter that took place in reality, in body. It really happened in her life, thanks be to God. How many of you here know about Back Bay Mission? Anybody? Oh, okay. Oh, we got to get to work around here. Back Bay Mission is a ministry in the United Church of Christ. And you need to find out about Back Bay Mission. Down near Biloxi, Mississippi, and amongst people who, many of whom are incredibly poor, mostly people of color. State of Mississippi is, for people who believe in Jesus, they don't ever believe in doing what Jesus wants them to do relative to the poor. There are no services offered. Back Bay stands alone in many ways for the people in southern Mississippi, providing services that aren't provided anywhere else. It's a ministry that's incredible. And I know of any given number of people who went there, and you can go and serve and sign up to do even weeks of house construction and so forth. Storm came. I can't remember which one. You know how it goes. You've lived here. Storms come and go. Came through Biloxi. There was so much destruction at Back Bay. So much loss of facilities that these poor people needed. Volunteers flooded in. There was concern about whether the mission could continue to be fulfilled, what Back Bay's future was. And people came and they worked themselves almost to death, but they worked and they rebuilt because they cared not about an institution, but about the people that Back Bay Mission served. It was a severe crisis, the worst maybe that Back Bay Mission ever faced. And guess what? Easter came for Back Bay Mission. It looked a whole lot like things broken, too broke to mend. But it wasn't. The disciples must have felt that way. It was a horrible day. That Easter morning, Mary had gone deep in grief to do what she must do. And she was certainly caught off guard by what she found. The mystery surrounding it all. John's telling of the story wrapped with theology, trying to push back the critics of the day. I mean, if I'm Jesus come back from the dead, I'm not going to take time to fold up my linen nicely, and I'm an obsessive-compulsive person. That in itself was a story to push back theological critics about Jesus and the resurrection. She came and she experienced a mystery she didn't understand, and she went and told others. And slowly the mystery began to be revealed. And Easter took place. It's powerful stuff, this Easter story. Easter reminded the disciples that God's wanted to provide hope. God wanted to re-engage in human history even when human beings time and again had said no thanks. We got this. It's a powerful story that God, just as God had promised the people of Israel never to let them go, that God had promised the people of Jesus' day that this God could be counted on, and that life was full of hope, no matter what the circumstances. It was a powerful reminder that God wanted to provide that hope so they could re-engage in the world instead of hiding behind closed doors. That it wasn't really things broken, too broke to mend. that there really was a possibility of proclaiming hope where people found little hope. It's a message. The message is, who are we to judge whether or not we, or the stuff of our life for that matter, is broken, too broke to mend? My old spiritual hero, Carl R. Marney, once reminded those of us who would read and listen that the tragedy of Judas in the story of the Passion wasn't the betrayal. It was his denial of this great truth, that neither he nor anyone was too broken to be mended. So when you go home today, you can hum this great hymn that we sang to start with. You could talk about what somebody looked like and their frocks and so forth. That's a good thing about being pastors. We don't have to pick out something to wear at Easter time. You could talk about any number of things. But somewhere inside, no matter where you are on life's journey, no matter what you're carrying with you, please know that when it comes to God's realm and who God is and what God's work is all about, you were never too broken to be mended. That things, regardless of how you see them, are not broken and too broke to mend. That you're the stuff that God has the capacity to work with. I grew up where English is a second language in southern Appalachia. I grew up trying to figure out how I could get through school with the least amount of work. I grew up when preacher after preacher at revivals and Bible studies were determined to try to convert me away from the method of spitball shooting and get serious about religion. I grew up thinking, when I finally got off to college, that I knew it all and could convert all those liberals. I grew up with a mother named Grace who knew so little about grace. And yet through the years, I've been amazed, truly amazed, at how far grace can go with a flawed vehicle. And I've encountered people in church, amazingly, for whom that was the same case. You have no idea what God could do with you and your stuff. None. Because Easter says all things are being made new. Today and tomorrow and forevermore. Hallelujah. Easter comes and comes again. And things aren't broken, too broke to mend. When it comes to the work of God among us.